As for a future life, every man must judge for himself between conflicting vague probabilities. It is mere rubbish thinking. At present, of origin of life, one might as well think of origin of matter, although much remains obscure, and will long remain obscure. I am convinced that natural selection has been the main but not exclusive means of modification. Mere chance alone would never account for so habitual and large an amount of difference as that between varieties of the same species. I have called this principle, by which each slight variation, if useful, is preserved, by the term of natural selection. From the first dawn of life, all organic beings are found to resemble each other in descending degrees, so that they can be classed in groups under groups. This classification is evidently not arbitrary like the grouping of stars in constellations. There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers, having been originally breathed by the Creator into a few forms or into one. I cannot pretend to throw the least light on such abstruse problems. The mystery of the beginning of all things is insoluble to us, and I for one must be content to remain an agnostic. There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers, having been originally breathed into a few forms or into one, and that, whilst this planet has gone cycling on according to the fixed law of gravity, from so simple a beginning endless forms most beautiful and most wonderful have been, and are being, evolved. Nothing can be more hopeless than to attempt to explain the similarity of pattern in members of the same class, by utility or by the doctrine of final causes. Man is descended from a hairy-tailed quadruped, probably arboreal in its habits. It is not the strongest of the species that survives. Not the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is the most adaptable to change. We will now discuss in a little more detail the struggle for existence. Great is the power of steady misrepresentation, but the history of science shows that fortunately this power does not long endure. It may be doubted whether any character can be named which is distinctive of a race and is constant, at some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries. The civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. Man tends to increase at a greater rate than his means of subsistence. The very essence of instinct is that it's followed independently of reason. One general law, leading to the advancement of all organic beings, namely, multiply, vary, let the strongest live and the weakest die. A man who dares to waste 1 hour of time has not discovered the value of life. A republic cannot succeed till it contains a certain body of men imbued with the principles of justice and honor. A scientific man ought to have no wishes, no affections, a mere heart of stone. The highest stage in moral culture at which we can arrive is when we recognize that we ought to control our thoughts. It seems to me absurd to doubt that a man may be an ardent theist and an evolutionist. I have never been an atheist in the sense of denying the existence of a god. A man's friendships are one of the best measures of his worth. Ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge. It is those who know little, and not those who know much, who so positively assert that this or that problem will never be solved by science. If the misery of the poor be caused not by the laws of nature, but by our institutions, great is our sin. I am not apt to follow blindly the lead of other men. Man has an instinctive tendency to speak, as we see in the babble of our young children, but no child has an instinctive tendency to bake, brew, or write. The love for all living creatures is the most noble attribute of man. I am almost convinced, quite contrary to opinion I started with, that species are not. It is like confessing a murder. Immutable, physiological experiment on animals is justifiable for real investigation, but not for mere damnable and detestable curiosity. Sympathy beyond the confines of man, that is, humanity to the lower animals, seems to be one of the latest moral acquisitions. Animals, whom we have made our slaves, we do not like to consider our equal. Besides love and sympathy, animals exhibit other qualities connected with the social instincts which in us would be called moral.